All right, so today we're diving headfirst into a controversy brewing in Jammu and Kashmir. It's a story that blends politics, economics, and maybe even a touch of, well, cricket.
Yeah, a real head scratcher.
We're talking about a land deal, a big one. A former Sri Lankan cricketer was granted a huge piece of land, 10.4 hectares, in Kathua, and the whole thing shrouded in secrecy.
A lot of unanswered questions, that's for sure. We don't even know for certain who this cricketer is. The details of the deal haven't exactly been publicized.
And that lack of transparency has ignited a firestorm. Imagine the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly is not too happy about this. They're demanding answers. Some pretty prominent figures are leading the charge. Folks like Mohammed Yusuf Taragami from the CPM and Congress leader Ghulam Ahmad Mir. They're questioning the legality of the whole thing, the secrecy, the whole 9 yards.
It's no surprise this has become such a hot-button issue. You have to remember the backdrop here, the revocation of Article 370 in 2019.
Right, a game changer.
Absolutely. It opened up Jammu and Kashmir to outside investment, and the government has been actively wooing investors ever since.
Big names, too. You've got Dubai's Emaar Group, the people behind the Burj Khalifa, investing a cool 250 crore rupees in projects there.
So the government is pushing for economic development, no doubt about it, but this specific land deal, well, it's raising eyebrows.
Oh, yeah, and it taps into a bigger debate, doesn't it? This tension between economic development and the potential for demographic shifts.
You hit the nail on the head. Some people see outside investment as the key to job creation, the engine for economic growth in Jammu and Kashmir, but there are those who are worried about the impact on the local population, about being pushed aside, marginalized. And this land deal, it kind of crystallizes those fears.
Especially when you consider what this land is supposedly earmarked for, right? The cricketer plans to set up an aluminum can manufacturing plant and a whole beverage filling unit.
We're talking about a project estimated at a whopping 1,600 crore rupees. To put that into perspective, that's over 6 times the amount invested by that big-name Emaar Group we were talking about.
So people are naturally wondering, is this a genuine economic venture?
Yeah.
Or is it a land grab cleverly disguised as development?
Yeah, a legitimate question. And the government's silence on the matter isn't helping. Even Rural Development Minister Javeed Ahmed Dar claimed to have no knowledge of the deal.
That kind of secrecy just fuels suspicion, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Transparency, or the lack thereof, is at the heart of this controversy. You'd think if everything was above board, if this project was truly designed to benefit the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the government would be shouting it from the rooftops, right?
Makes you wonder if it's more about political maneuvering than genuine economic development.
Well, you have politicians like AAP MLA Miraj Malik saying publicly that local people struggling with their own land disputes are being ignored while a foreign national gets the red carpet treatment.
It does feed into that narrative that outside investors are getting priority over the needs and concerns of the local population.
Yeah, definitely adds another layer to this whole debate.
Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the aluminum factory itself. Leaving the controversy aside for a moment, what does a project like this actually entail? What are we looking at here?
Well, an aluminum can manufacturing and beverage filling operation, that's a pretty complex undertaking. You're talking about everything from sourcing raw materials like aluminum sheets to fabricating the cans themselves, printing, filling, packaging, the whole shebang.
It's a big operation, not just a matter of throwing up a building. You need specialized equipment, skilled labor, a whole supply chain to make it work.
Exactly. And that raises the question, does Jammu and Kashmir have the infrastructure and expertise to support this kind of industry? Or will the benefits mainly flow to businesses and workers from outside the region?
And then there's the environmental impact. We got to talk about that. Aluminum production uses a lot of energy, generates a lot of waste. How's that going to be managed? What about the potential consequences for the local environment?
These are critical questions. If we're talking sustainable development, we have to think long-term. The economic benefits are important, but so is the environmental impact.
So we've got this controversial land deal, a tight-lipped government, and a massive industrial project with potential benefits, but also risks. Lots to untangle here.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, no doubt about it. But by looking at the different pieces of this puzzle, we can start to grasp the bigger issues at play here. Economic development, political transparency, and ultimately, the future of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
This whole thing, it's really become a lightning rod for all those anxieties people have about land rights and cultural identity in Jammu and Kashmir.
Like a symbol, almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's feeding into this fear that, well, if they can give away land to a foreign cricketer, what's to stop them from doing it again?
Exactly. It makes you question who really has the power to make these decisions. Are the people living in Jammu and Kashmir, are their interests really being considered? And we can't forget the history here either.
You're right. Revoking Article 370, that was huge. For those who might not know, that article granted special autonomous status to Jammu and Kashmir. Getting rid of it in 2019, that basically integrated the region more directly with the rest of India. Huge political and economic changes.
And for a lot of people, it's left them feeling uncertain about the future. Those concerns about the long-term impact, those are legitimate.
It goes beyond just politics and economics, though, doesn't it? We're talking about people's livelihoods, their culture, their sense of place, deeply personal stuff.
Absolutely. We can look at all the investment figures and development plans we want, but at the end of the day, it's about how these decisions impact the people who actually live in Jammu and Kashmir.
So let's circle back to that aluminum can factory. Even if we forget about the land deal itself, is this really the best way to help the local economy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Manufacturing, sure, it can create jobs, but we have to look at the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
Well, what kinds of jobs are we talking about? Will they require skills that local people don't have? What about the wages? Will these jobs actually allow families to make ends meet? We need to think about whether this factory is going to benefit the local community or mostly attract workers from outside.
And then there's the environmental piece of the puzzle, which we touched on earlier. Aluminum production, it guzzles energy and creates a ton of waste.
Right. Can the region handle those environmental challenges? Do they have the infrastructure for things like waste management and pollution control? Have those potential impacts even been properly studied? Sustainable development means taking the long view, considering the environmental costs, not just the economic gains.
You've made some really good points. Seems like we need a more thoughtful approach to development in Jammu and Kashmir, one that actually considers the unique aspects of the region and what the people there need.
One size fits all doesn't work here. You can't just take a development model from somewhere else and expect it to work without any hiccups.
So what would a more tailored approach look like in this case?
Well, I think it starts with actually talking to the local communities. What are their goals? What are they worried about? What kind of development do they see as actually helping them and their future?
Makes sense. It's about listening to the people who are going to be most affected by these decisions, making sure they have a voice at the table.
Exactly. It shouldn't just be about development dictated from the top down, driven by government agendas or corporate interests. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone involved, solutions that help the region and its people thrive over the long haul.
And that brings us back to the issue of transparency, doesn't it? If the government really wants to attract investment and boost the economy in Jammu and Kashmir, they need to be open with the people they represent.
Transparency builds trust. It allows for more public participation in the decision-making process.
Without it, you just get suspicion and speculation, and a real disconnect between those in power and the people they're supposed to be serving.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It benefits everyone to make sure these decisions about development are made out in the open in a way that people can see and understand.
So let's zoom out for a second. If we move past this specific land deal and look at the bigger picture, what's the takeaway from this whole cricket can controversy? What should our listeners who are maybe just starting to learn about Jammu and Kashmir, what should they keep in mind?
I think this whole thing really highlights how tough it is to strike that balance between economic development and those social and cultural aspects that are so vital to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It's not a simple equation. There are compromises to be made, difficult choices.
We have to remember that Jammu and Kashmir isn't a monolith, right? There are lots of different perspectives, different interests at play, and those need to be acknowledged and respected.
Absolutely. And maybe the most important thing is remembering that at the heart of this debate, we're talking about real people, people whose lives are being directly affected by the decisions being made. Their voices matter. Their concerns need to be taken seriously. This isn't just about abstract ideas like investment and development. It's about the well-being of a community, preserving what makes it unique.
And those are things worth fighting for, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about creating a future where economic progress goes hand in hand with social justice and preserving culture.
Let's flip the script for a moment. Imagine our listeners are residents of Jammu and Kashmir. How might they be feeling about all of this?
It's complicated. I mean, on one hand, the idea of economic growth, more jobs, that's attractive, especially in a region that's faced its share of difficulties. The potential for new opportunities, a brighter future, that's enticing.
I can see that. But you're saying there's another side to this.
There is, and it's a powerful one. There's also this deep-seated fear, this fear of losing what makes Jammu and Kashmir special, losing their land, their traditions, their influence to outsiders.
It's like being caught between two powerful forces, isn't it? The desire for progress, but also the need to protect your heritage, your identity.
Exactly. That's the dilemma a lot of people in Jammu and Kashmir are facing today. How do you embrace progress without sacrificing what makes your community unique? How do you create a better future without losing sight of your past?
Big questions. And it feels like those questions go way beyond just Jammu and Kashmir. We see similar tensions all over the world as globalization and investment change local economies and landscapes.
It's a global phenomenon for sure. We see
Mm.
it everywhere, from the Amazon rainforest to the Arctic Circle. Finding solutions that actually work, that requires understanding the local context, having open and honest conversations, and a real commitment to making sure that development benefits everyone, not just a select few.
It's about making sure that development isn't just about numbers, but about people, about their well-being and their sense of belonging.
You got it. Sustainable development should empower communities, not push them out. It should create opportunities for everyone, not just those with the most money or connections.
So for those of us who aren't directly involved in these situations, what can we do to support positive change? How can we help promote a more equitable and sustainable approach to development, whether it's in Jammu and Kashmir or anywhere else?
It starts with education. Taking the time to learn about these complex issues, understanding different viewpoints, and questioning our own assumptions.
We can't just rely on sound bites and headlines. We have to dig deeper, have thoughtful discussions, and lift up the voices of those who are often ignored or silenced.
And we need to hold our leaders accountable, demand transparency, make sure that these development projects actually benefit the communities they're supposed to help.
Because at the end of the day, it's about building a fairer world. A world where everyone has a chance to thrive, no matter where they come from or what their background is.
Well said. I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about along those lines. It's easy to get lost in the specifics of a situation like this land deal, but it's important to step back and see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, what started as a simple land deal has really opened up a can of worms, so to speak. But as difficult as these conversations can be, they're crucial if we want to build a better future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. Our choices have consequences, and we all have a role to play in creating a world that's both more just and more sustainable.
We've talked about a lot, haven't we? The aluminum can factory, the whole balancing act between economic development and protecting culture. But I keep thinking about what we can actually do, as listeners, as global citizens. How can we make a difference?
It all starts with awareness, I think. We need to be informed about what's happening in the world, and not just what's happening in our own little corner of it. That means looking for information from different sources, checking our own biases, and talking to people who see things differently than we do.
Being smart about the information we take in, right?
Mhm.
Not just accepting everything we read or hear, but actually thinking critically and considering different viewpoints.
Exactly. And then there's using our voices. We can support organizations that are doing good work on the ground, promoting sustainable development. We can write to our elected officials, hold them accountable for their decisions, and we can talk to our friends, family, our communities, just to raise awareness about these issues.
Recognizing that we all have some influence, no matter how big or small.
Yeah,
And we can use that influence to push for positive change.
absolutely. And another thing we can do is support businesses and organizations that are operating ethically and sustainably. We can choose to spend our money with companies that care about the environment, treat their workers fairly, and are invested in their communities.
So making conscious choices in our daily lives, understanding that even small actions can make a difference.
Right. And I think that's a pretty powerful message to end on. We might not all be politicians or CEOs, but we all have the power to make choices that reflect our values, choices that help create a world that's more just and sustainable.
It's been quite a journey today, hasn't it? We started with what seemed like a straightforward land deal, and we ended up exploring some of the biggest challenges facing the world.
It just goes to show even issues that seem very localized can have a global impact. And understanding how those pieces fit together, that's crucial if we want to create a better future for everyone.
You're right. This whole thing, this land deal, it's really opened up a whole bunch of complicated questions.
Mhm.
But as tough as these conversations are, we need to have them if we want to create a better world for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's about realizing that our choices have consequences, and we all have a part to play in making the world a more just and sustainable place.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has encouraged you to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a world where economic progress and social justice go hand in hand. Until next time, stay curious.